Could you also talk more about the intergalactic beings that we're also waiting patiently to appreciate?
What were you saying at the end?
Could you talk a little bit more about what it is that you know about that? Do you know of them specifically? Are you going to share them with us?
We're going to share them with you?
Yeah, how is this going to go down?
They have no problem saying that themselves.
Well, how do you see that going down? As far as the meeting, or say the relevance, or just the revelation of that?
Well, they exist, first of all. Just as much as you and I exist. And they've been in communication with us for quite some time on different levels of our consciousness. Whatever felt relevant, whatever level we're receptive to that. For example, many of us are receptive in our dream state, or subliminally, subconsciously. So there's a lot of communication happening, again, quote-unquote telepathically through vibration, that go unnoticed most of the time, because it's not relevant for us to necessarily notice that, but it helps to support that background from which we look and experience the play we're experiencing. So we can stay focused on the play, but there is constant subconscious, well, constant is a big word, but there is very regular communication and influence happening. And not just with extraterrestrial beings, but also among ourselves.
Is this all within our own dimension? Are these beings in, say, the third dimension before when they were communicating, and now we're moving with them into the fourth? Or are they already in the fourth looking back at us?
That's more accurate, usually, yes. I mean, it's possible. I mean, there are extraterrestrial civilizations that are third density, but it's highly, it's not as common for them to actually travel in that particular way, intergalactically, and communicate at that high level. I do feel that there are high advanced third density beings that are at that threshold themselves where it is able to do that, or where they are able to do that, but it's not frequent at all. It's not.
Well, at the beginning of the talk, you talked about if we were fourth dimensional beings, we wouldn't want to put our clothes on and get hot down in the third dimension.
There's a difference between dimension and density. Gotcha. So let's stick with the word density, because we're already having fourth dimensions, because 3 of space, 1 of time. So we're becoming fifth dimensional beings, or fourth density beings. What was your question?
There can be communication from the next density down. Not necessarily that we'd want to come down in density, but we can actually transfer information down.
Absolutely. There is cross-density communications happening all the time in many levels of our being. Absolutely. But is this specifically your question? Or do you want to ask?
I guess it would be the need to reach down and pull up. Like, these beings, are there beings that do this for us? Is there a service being rendered from above?
Not for us, but they're answering a calling. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So everything is vibration. So if there is enough of a calling, enough of a desire for support, for enlightenment, for empowerment, for awakening, for understanding, for help, for whatever, then that sends out a particular vibration. If that is large enough as a civilization, then even as an individual, you're always met, but there's all kinds of, there's guides, there's, all that stuff. So when we're talking specifically about civilizations picking up on our signal, it is when there's a certain threshold reached, and doesn't even have to be as large as you may think. It doesn't have to be like 50% of the people are asking for support. It can be much lower than that. But there needs to be a certain type of threshold that sends out like a beacon for help, for it to become relevant, for a consistent group consciousness to start to show up and interact with us subconsciously, and sometimes consciously, and sometimes even physically, although that is more rare initially.
Is that you?
Is that me? What?
Yeah. Have you come? Where'd you come from? How did you? And thank you, but we don't see many of you. And do you know of any other yous? Are there anybody else like you that you run across?
There's many. There's many of me. Not all of them have remembered as well as I have remembered. But there is many, 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 many of me that are present at this timing. And to answer your question in that way, yes, no, my physical body, no. My physical body is a product of this particular space-time density. My consciousness and my theme and the intention with which I came here is not. So in that sense, I am from elsewhere, if you want to call it that way.
Where?
Huh?
Where are you from?
Where? Higher density.
More specifics, please.
Nope. it's not relevant. But there is many, likewise, that have answered a calling. There's many ways to answer a calling of a civilization. One is to show up physically in your own form, and one is, which is the most intimate of ways, the most courageous of ways, not to beat my own drum, but just in general, just to explain the process of this. One of the most intimate ways is to become, on an expressionate personality level, on a personal consciousness level, to become a complete product of the civilization that you wish to answer the calling from, or that you wish to be of assistance in. So what we call incarnation, for example. So we literally take the substance of this density, which is the physicality of it, and the mental imprints of it, and the collective understanding of it, and we take on, with a portion of our consciousness, we take on that vibratory state to such a crystallized fashion where we appear as a physical being with a mind that is created out of this substance, and that has the same limitations, that has the same imprints, that has the same challenges, in a sense. And then the only difference in that sense being that there is a higher probability for remembrance. There is a brightness that, in a sense, kind of protects the being from completely being soaked up in this vibration. There's so many people that share, ever since I was a kid, I knew everything was possible, I knew I could fly, I knew I wanted to love, I didn't understand how people worked and operated, etc. I felt way too sensitive for this world, all that stuff. Now again, there's not many, well, there is many in a sense, but that's why it's so intimate. That's why it's such a service, because it doesn't always happen that someone remembers that well. So it's kind of a courageous act to want to be of service to such an extent, and of course it serves them too in many ways, to become a portion of the civilization in that way, in such an intimate way that we can actually speak to you as you. You know, it's such a perfect mechanism, such a perfect way to answer that calling. It's the perfect service, really.
Is there learning for you?
Absolutely, absolutely.
On that level of being of service and giving yourself up to this extent, do you get rewarded enough for this to be, I mean, besides the Tesla, of course.
Besides the Tesla? Yes. Yes, absolutely, otherwise I would die. And in a sense, I feel I'm holding on by a thin string sometimes, and that's not a negative thing. It means that there is not a great necessity for me to be here for any personal reason. So I feel very thinly connected here, if that makes sense. But what makes that single line very strong is that interaction such as this, is that calling, is the result of meeting, of demand meeting supply, or the calling meeting the called, in that sense. So as long as it's relevant for me to share in this way and express and expand in this way, I will continue to hold on to this vibratory state in that sense. So the answer is yes. If I'm still here physically, to you, appearing, then there still is learning and relevance for me to be here.
Good.
And thank you.